Mr. Vijay Kumar, I'll give the NIC's perspective of what is the direction and plan of action in the e-governance space for cloud implementation. I'm happy to announce at the outset that a plan of cloud initiative has been approved for implementation within NIC in the entire country, and this is an approved plan which I am now presenting. So we have already known what is IAS, what is PAS, what is SAS, and there is a usual confusion between the grid and cloud. So normally everybody thinks grids and clouds are same. It's not true, but there is a lot of similarity, and there are certain major issues in e-governance software development and operations in today, which, you know, we have talked of NEGP with about 100,000 kiosks, and how is it possible to have interoperability of software without the service-oriented architecture? So today, all the software modules are developed independently by different agencies. Major stakeholder still is NIC, and then there are other stakeholders like TCS and various other agencies, but there is no interoperability, let alone across the organizations. There is no interoperability within the software developed within the same organization also. Like, for example, those who want to buy Taj Mahal can raise their hands and go and buy it. You will get your title deed. The reason for that is that the software for registration is different from software for land records, and they don't have interoperability. Though according to the law, you are supposed to check before you buy. So the technology, as you know, has evolved from the old structured programming up to the service-oriented architecture. The key components of service-oriented architecture will be service boundaries, explicitly mentioned, and services are autonomous. And I am proposing that all these e-governance projects which are right now under implementation are already implemented by various agencies, more than about 20-30 agencies, should be switched over to the service-oriented architecture and web services, without which there will be no interoperability today. So the state level projects are mostly with NIC. Like, for example, in Bangalore is only one place where the registration and land records are integrated. Like, you cannot buy, for example, Kabban Park. So whereas you can do that in other states because there is no interoperability as such achieved. And say, for example, it's a birth certificate issued by municipality or panchayat. It is not available to anybody else today because there is no web service available to call it. So I am proposing that all these legacy systems, the SOA layer has to be wrapped around. This is a very important step. If you don't do it, you will continue to live in islands, and e-governance will not have interoperability. And without interoperability, e-governance will be sham, if not partial, as it is today. So a web service, you know, I don't have to tell what are web services. They are very successful already. And they achieve interoperability thanks to the invocation from SOAP and the XML interface. So what the advantages of web services are also very well known, and all the vendors are supporting web services with BPEL and BPMS. Now this is the most important slide I wanted to show, that the common web service definition framework. So this is a very important issue which agencies like NIC, NISG, DIT have to sit together and start writing down on paper what is the repository or what is the framework of common web services. Because everybody developed their own web services, there is no interoperability. What are the common web services? So for the whole country, there could be single common web service definition framework. So this web service could be 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000, but for the central web services, there is not much of an issue because it's common across the country, like passport or immigration. But the state web services like land records, for every state there is a different web service. So you need a two-tier hierarchy. Given the state code, you call the state level web service and be able to recover the data from the common metadata. And the same logic will apply, go down to the district level, because many districts are operating independently with some web services. So in the ultimate definition, we'll have three-tier architecture of the district, state, and national web service repositories. This is what I proposed in my architecture, which has by Secretary IT and DGNIC and various other international conference agencies, but it is still being implemented because the willingness, consciousness is still not there. So what I propose is that the national data centers of NIC could be hosting the national web services repositories, and the state level data centers of the state governments or the NIC could host the state level web service repositories, and the futuristic district data centers could host the district level web services to be more complete for futuristic planning. So this huge task requires a very extensive infrastructure and secure networking architecture. So I proposed an e-governance grid of India on the lines of other scientific grids, but with a design of OGSA standard being used for e-governance application. OGSA is integrating grid with web services. Earlier web services were different and grid was different, but now both are integrated, supporting service-oriented architecture on grid. And it also supports additional feature of stateful web services. Normally web services are stateless, but in e-governance transactions there are multiple steps involved up and down. For a particular transaction between land records registration, there are 5 times, 6 times up and down verification. So you need a stateful web service to recall the past state to go to the next state. So I propose to use this Globus toolkit, which is an open source grid middleware, which has been used by us in the grid, and we are trying to implement this EGGI on the part of the as a backbone of the cloud. Let's go back to the. So basically, our e-governance cloud, which will be a grid cloud, So what I am proposing is that you have the e-governance cloud with the grid behind it, where all the data centers of NIC will be connected to each other. And that's what I was talking about, the e-governance grid of India here at the bottom. The SWANs to be integrated with NICNet, that the guideline is already there by DIT, but it is followed only in one place, that is in Gujarat, and yet to be followed by other states. And grid SOA to be implemented to create web service repositories. Already I presented you in detail. And all the history and functionalities of IaaS and PaaS are already known. We have discussed about grid and cloud. Grid is not same as cloud, but required for different purposes. And mostly the cloud market is dominated by the private cloud vendors like Amazon, who want to make money out of the additional resources they have in their own data centers. That is fine with us, but for the government it will be a totally different requirement, because government cannot put its cloud in Amazon in unknown place. So we have to put in our own data centers in our own cloud. So we have to have a private cloud. So the private cloud of the government will have the data centers of NIC and data centers of the governments, that state governments, integrated together with SWANs and NICNet to a kind of a grid environment where we can have the private cloud of the government supported. That's the design which we made, and the paper which I wrote, I just submitted to the chairman. And this paper has also been approved by at the top level by Secretary DIT. In fact, yesterday Dr. Chandrasekhar was mentioning this in his talk, and I discussed with him later also how the private cloud has to be implemented for the government, and already got the approval to achieve the implementation of the private cloud. The advantage of private cloud, it will be within the boundaries of the firewall of the organization, except the disadvantage is that it will cost a lot more than public clouds. Doesn't matter. NIC and government cannot afford to have anything other than a private cloud for sake of control and security and privacy. So we are going ahead with the design and implementation of a private cloud for our developers as well as for hosting the applications from remote areas. That's another important issue. The remote areas of India are so bad in infrastructure that you just cannot have any server in any village or even a block or even in a district. It's very difficult. So the data center will be in the state capital, and the servers can be made available to remote provisioning to the users in districts or in villages. Now we are using Eucalyptus for this purpose, because Eucalyptus is well established, open source cloud middleware, and we have tie-up with them, and we are successful till now in implementing Eucalyptus. And the software which we already have developed will be converted to software as a service model on the Eucalyptus that is platform, infrastructure as a service. So I hope you know what is Eucalyptus. It stands for elastic utility computing. It has cluster controller, cloud controller, and node controller. It is developed in UCSB, and now it is a commercial corporation. So we have already installed it in about half a dozen states, and it operates on Zen, KVM, and VMware. And we are able to multiply the hardware into many virtual machines on which we host the applications. We are slowly shifting the existing applications, and we are also going to shift the new applications, like particularly e-procurement. And coming to the plan of action of in NIC, we have two first plan of action. One is the cluster-based cloud, other is grid-based cloud. So for the cluster-based cloud, we will use Eucalyptus. It's a proven technology, and support is also available. And for the grid-based cloud, we would like to use Globus Nimbus. We are still in testing stage for that. For the Eucalyptus cloud, but we are in much ahead of progress. We have already implemented in about 4 locations. And it will be initially for internal usage. We'll be hosting the applications and providing the virtual machines for developers of NIC sitting in blocks or in districts, or even in villages with our e-Panchayat project. Single village in a Panchayat can also avail an advanced server without going anywhere in their own. That is the beauty of infrastructure as a service in e-governance. So these services which NIC will offer as infrastructure as services or platform as a service or software as a service will be available to central government departments, public sector undertakings, and to secretariat. For example, new secretariat in Chennai, it will be an ideal situation to have the cloud virtual machines made available to all the users in the secretariat. And same thing will apply to other state data centers. We can provide a large number of hundreds of virtual machines, unimaginable, in fact, unlimited number of virtual machines. In fact, someone pointed out that you can have a mobile van going from village to village, and anyone who wants a virtual server, you will get it. But of course, in government, we are addressing only at the government applications and not the common man as such. Common man citizens requirement is a very big open-ended question. So for the state government departments, district collectorates and district level departments or taluka block level, all the costs of site preparation, IT infrastructure can be drastically reduced if not eliminated, and sometimes it's infeasible also where we can reach. We can reach where it is not reachable and still provide infrastructure and platform and software services. So we have already done the first part of it, and this next part is in progress. Thank you.